Good morning, everyone. Can you hear me? Yes, I hope. My name is Cheryl Dunson, and I'm president of the League of Women Voters of Connecticut. And on behalf of the League, I welcome you all here today. Although most people know the League of Women Voters best for this time of year during election season because of our debates and our voters' guides and our voter registration efforts, our work continues throughout the year, well beyond Election Day, trying to inform voters on issues that affect their communities, their families, the nation, and even internationally. So on the seat, you'll see our next statewide event, which is scheduled for May, which is our Symposium on International Relations. So I hope that you will join us for that one as well. Wednesday, for those of you who don't know, was Food Day. And Food Day is a relatively new celebration, a national celebration, bringing together people from all walks of life to learn, eat, and advocate for a more healthy, affordable, and sustainable food system. So building on that theme, we have our conference today, From Land and Sea, Food for the Good of Connecticut. And we'll focus on the role of Connecticut's agriculture and aquaculture in improving the health and economy of our state. And we guarantee you there will be a lot of food for thought. We sincerely thank our distinguished panel of speakers for being here today. Following this discussion, we have a particularly special element. We will be awarding students from the VOAG program an award for developing a presentation for a new Connecticut product or service. So we're eagerly looking forward to that. At the close of the conference, we invite you to visit our exhibitors who are outside. We have quite a few with very interesting displays. We would like to thank the Bioscience and Technology Center for providing this facility. We want to thank Jen Cushman, who's the president of the Connecticut Agri-Science Teachers Association in this effort. And certainly last but not least, we want to thank Cigna for their financial support and commitment, which they share with us for informing and engaging the public on critical issues. So now I'm very pleased to turn it over to our moderator, Kay Maxwell, who's a former Connecticut. I follow in her footsteps, and I'm very proud of it. And she's also a former National League president who will be moderating. Thank you.
Thank you, Cheryl. Sorry, page one ended up on the floor, so I'm obviously very pleased to be moderating this conference yet again. It's really become one of the highlights of the Connecticut League's year. And I wanted to mention that the conference is being videotaped in its entirety, courtesy of League members Al and Margaret Wurtenberg. And copies are going to be made available and distributed to all local leagues for distribution to their local access stations. And of course, the event will also be posted on the videos page of the LWVCT website. We're going to be hearing from 4 speakers on this topic, From Land and Sea, Food for the Good of Connecticut, and each is going to make about a 20-minute presentation. And as usual, I will be the keeper of the time and the bad guy. And after all their presentations have been made, we'll open it up for Q&A with questions coming from you in the audience. Now, hopefully you have index cards that you either picked up or were given to you when you came in, on which you can write questions. I'm seeing lots of heads shaking no.
Well, I'm going to be giving them out when they arrive.
Oh, the index cards have not arrived. All right. At the conclusion, we have plenty of time, because at the conclusion, so just try and remember or jot down, if you have your own piece of paper, a question that occurs to you, and we will have approximately an hour at the end of the presentations for those questions and answers. And please, when you do get to writing on the card, just indicate if it's a question for a specific panel member or just something that you want to be addressed by the entire panel. And I'll briefly introduce each speaker before they make the presentations, but again, you do each have in your chair a program that has complete bios of each of our four speakers, and so I encourage you to read those. Since we will not be taking time to go through all those, we'd rather hear from the speakers, I think, than about them. Now, the aim of the conference, as Cheryl mentioned, is to educate us on how food production in Connecticut can benefit the economy, improve nutrition in institutional settings, and increase accessibility to state-produced nutritious foods for all, including those in urban areas and or those with low incomes. Now, as typical of the League, the topic could not be more timely. I'm sure many of you saw the recent New York Times Sunday magazine that focused completely on food. It contains a number of notable articles, but there was one in particular that caught my attention. The title is Heavenly Earth, and it focuses on California's Central Valley as our greatest food resource. The valley yields a third of all the produce grown in the United States, and unlike the Midwest, which concentrates on corn and soybeans, more than 230 different crops are grown in the valley. That's the good news. Now, according to the article, the bad news is, since 1970, the population has more than doubled to $6.8 million. 8 million people, obviously, virtually all of whom, it seems, drive more often than not a Ford F-150. The air, trapped between mountain ranges, stinks, and the pollution is consistently ranked among the most severe in the country. Worse, there are so many cows nearby in mega dairies and feedlots that the air contains microscopic particles of dried dung, enough so that you can taste it. I smelled it on my clothes when I unpacked each night and even brought it home with me. I have never carried Visine in my life, but there I was using it every half hour. And again, according to the article, this, and not the verdant hills of the Green Giant commercial, is where our food comes from. The author then discusses the critical need for farmers, both big and small, to produce decent food sustainably. He further comments that the food that's grown in the valley may be copious, but it's not necessarily all that good. The fruits and vegetables at my breakfast buffet in Glendale were pretty much the same as the stuff I bought 2 weeks ago at a supermarket on Broadway. And though I ate well on my trip, I tasted plenty of produce that was grown to withstand a couple of weeks in transit and on the shelf. And with that, let's begin and hear first, to set the context of today's program. It's my pleasure to introduce Steve Ravitsky, who is the Commissioner of the Connecticut Department of Agriculture. Welcome.
Thank you very much. Good morning. So I'm from northeastern Connecticut, and I carpooled down with Lucy Nolan this morning. We wanted to make sure we got here in plenty of time, so I left my house bright and early, and I met Lucy at the state office building at 7 o'clock. We got here quite early, so it gave us an opportunity to tour the outside of the facility. I've been the Commissioner of Agriculture since January 2011. Governor Malloy appointed me Commissioner. I'm thrilled to be in this position. I've spent a lot of my life involved in farming and agriculture, and I actually worked at the State Department of Agriculture for 8 years prior to leaving to run the nonprofit Farm Bureau Association. So for me, having grown up in farming and agriculture, my grandparents were dairy farmers, and my dad's family raised meat birds, chickens. To see the renaissance that we're experiencing in farming and agriculture in Connecticut, to me, is just absolutely amazing. And I just wish my grandparents and my parents were alive to see it. In a small state like Connecticut that's fairly populated and fairly urbanized and suburbanized, the ability to get good things done relies heavily on working with partners. And I'm thrilled to be here, and I'm glad that the League has chosen this as one of its topics. And we were talking earlier, as you know, my assistant at the Department of Agriculture, Mary Grace Peak, lobbied for the League for many years at the state capitol in Hartford, so she wanted to make sure that I gave her well wishes to you and to the members of the league. So in working with stakeholders, quite frankly, I work with John and Lucy on a number of things. Lucy is a member of the Milk Regulation Board, the Working Lands Alliance, the Milk Promotion Board, the Food Policy Council in Connecticut, and John Tureen has worked with us on numerous issues about farm to institution. In fact, we're having a meeting coming up shortly that looks in depth at how we can better get Connecticut-grown foods from the farm into our schools, our K through 12 schools, and our hospitals, and our colleges and universities, and our state facilities. And certainly John's expertise and his willingness to serve on an ongoing working group in that regard is going to be huge for us. So again, my point is that in order for us as a relatively small state with a really small Department of Agriculture, it is critically important for us to be able to work with other institutions and other stakeholders, private nonprofits, colleges and universities, the Ag Experiment Station. We work closely with the College of Ag and Natural Resources at the University of Connecticut. I'd like to look at it as the three-legged stool of Connecticut agriculture, having the research and expertise of the Connecticut Agricultural Experiment Station, the support and expertise of the College of Ag and Natural Resources at UConn, along with the State Department of Agriculture. So in coming here today, the folks at the League had presented me with a number of questions that they would like me to explore, and the first being, what is agriculture in Connecticut, and what does it mean to us? That has been a question that has often been asked, and quite frankly, we didn't have very good answers until we worked with the College of Ag and Natural Resources at UConn to do an economic study of agriculture. We had used numbers that people had come up with, and they became just part of the conversation as a matter of routine. But the fact of the matter is that we hadn't really dug deep and explored where we are today. And in September 2010, the college completed its study and released a report which found that, in fact, Connecticut agriculture contributed $3.5 billion to the state's economy each and every year, that agriculture in the state of Connecticut represents some 20,000 jobs, and that the impact of Connecticut agriculture translates into $1,000 per Connecticut resident each year, and that every dollar in the agricultural economy in Connecticut actually generates up to an additional dollar of economic activity. So the key thing about having local farms is that that money generally stays here locally, and it just spins throughout our economy. When looking at agricultural sales, what the study found were a number of things, but that our green industry, greenhouse and nursery and turf, actually represents about half of agricultural sales here in Connecticut. It also found that dairy, while relatively small in comparison, we were having a conversation earlier with, I'm forgetting her name, but she's from Wisconsin, which is a big, with Christine, which is a huge dairy state. But agriculture in the state of Connecticut represents about 13% of our agricultural economy. And the important thing to recognize with dairy is not only the size of its sales, but the impact that it has on the landscape that we sometimes take for granted. But for every cow that is on a dairy farm, we have about 19,000 dairy cows in the state of Connecticut, that requires 2 to 3 acres to feed and care for those animals. So when you're driving down a road in western Connecticut or eastern Connecticut or in the lower Connecticut River Valley or north central Connecticut, and you see all of those cornfields and pasture lands, those lands may not be there if not for a strong dairy industry. And then what we often look right past, and we're down here in Fairfield County, is that our largest area of agricultural land is actually beneath the water in Long Island Sound. So we are actively farming here in the state of Connecticut hard-shelled clams and oysters, and the aquaculture industry in the state of Connecticut represents about 10% of the overall ag economy. And let's not forget about fruits and vegetables. Fruits are about 8%, vegetables about 6%. And then when I travel in the Northeast and in other parts of this country, what other secretaries and commissioners of agriculture and folks in the farming community don't realize is that we still have a fairly large, in terms of sales, significant tobacco industry. So those people who enjoy smoking premium cigars and pay big bucks for those cigars, the best cigars in the world are actually wrapped with our tobacco here in the state of Connecticut. And the key thing to know there is that the tobacco grows on the best of the best land. So while some of us, I'm not a smoker, I don't smoke cigars, I don't enjoy cigars, but I do know that tobacco is being grown on the best of the best land in the Connecticut River Valley. That land can grow anything and often does. And we have a lot of tobacco growers who are diversifying their operations, not only growing tobacco, but are now growing high-value vegetable crops. And as the demand for those vegetables increases, the diversification of those ag lands has grown. So I guess with that, that gives you an overview of where we are. 49% of sales are related to greenhouse and nursery, bedding plants, and nursery crops. The vast majority of croplands in the state of Connecticut are, in fact, dedicated to dairy. And we produce a fair amount of milk here in the state of Connecticut, but we still import about 50% of the dairy products that we consume. So we're importing half of the dairy products that we produce here. So there's actually some room for some growth there. And I think that for the most part, that growth area is in value-added products instead of selling milk, make cheese, yogurts, and other higher value ag products. One of the things that I would like to share with you is the work that we are doing to try to move to grow Connecticut farms, to grow agriculture here in the state of Connecticut. And one of our main focuses over the last year has been through the Governor's Council for Agricultural Development. And this is an organization that, quite frankly, had existed for quite some time. It had not met in probably a decade. The way the statute was, there were about 45 members of the council. And as you can imagine, trying to get 45 people together to decide anything is very difficult, if not impossible. And so what the General Assembly and the administration decided to do in the 2011 session of the General Assembly was to reshape the Governor's Council. They took this unworkable organization from that high membership number down to 15 members, appointed by both by the governor and by the leaders of the General Assembly, much like most of the organizations or committees, councils, commissions that the General Assembly establishes. The The council is made up of the Commissioner of Agriculture. I serve as the chairman. The Dean of the College of Ag and Natural Resources at UConn. A variety of producers. We also have representation from folks who process, folks who are in agricultural marketing, and sales, agricultural sales. So we have 15 members, and we've been meeting on a regular basis since January of this year. And one of the first things we did was to try to look at what other states are doing and what other states have done. So those of you who, I know folks who are members of the league do a lot of heavy thinking, and the one thing that you don't want to do is to reinvent the wheel. So you want to look at what have other people, what have they done, what has been successful, what hasn't been successful. So we want to borrow from those activities that can make the biggest gain in the shortest period of time here, and that's what we did. We looked at several states. We looked closely at what they did in Vermont in their farm-to-plate program. Unlike Connecticut, their plan focuses exclusively on food. I know this conference is mainly about food, but the Governor's Council is broader than that, and it looks at all aspects of Connecticut agriculture. What the change in the law set out for us was a mission to increase consumer demand for locally grown. And for food, that's estimated to be less than 1% of consumer food dollars that's spent on food. So it's a pretty low number. So less than 1%, you guys can kind of keep track of where your money goes, but generally it's believed that less than 1% of your consumer food dollars are spent on Connecticut-grown food. The legislature challenged us to increase that to at least 5% by 2020. May not seem like a big challenge, but it's a huge challenge, and the impact on the Connecticut economy will result in additional hundreds of millions of dollars flowing through our agricultural economy. What they also charged us to do was to make recommendations concerning the development, diversification, and promotion of agricultural products, programs, and enterprises in general, and that the council should provide for an interchange of ideas. And that's what we've set out to do. Again, we met in the Reshaped Council for the first time in January. We've met many times since then, and we've embarked on a fair amount of research. We're trying to work with our stakeholders. So we did a massive outreach program. We identified key individuals, key stakeholders, and we've interviewed 55 of those stakeholders. Each interview was about 2 hours, so we had over 110 hours of interviews that we conducted. We did an online survey. We've got information from about 250 individuals across the state. And then we've also conducted 4 regional listening sessions in various areas across the state. We had a listening session in Norwich, one in Windsor, one in New Haven, and one up in Torrington. Now we are at the point where we are looking at the data that we've collected, and we've identified some key challenges and opportunities in what we've done. And we now would like to dive a little deeper into those identified subject areas. We do have a meeting coming up at the beginning of November where we will get other key stakeholders together in an all-day session and look at what we've learned from the interviews and the surveys in the listening sessions, and then try to actually make specific recommendations to move Connecticut agriculture forward. What our goal is, and those of us who are involved in government, I was involved in local government, I've been in state government for a long time. The one thing that's been frustrating to our constituents is that, often we do the same things in the same way, expecting different results, and we have to be smarter than that. We don't have endless supply of resources. In fact, I don't think I don't have enough resources to do all the things that I need to do as a Department of Agriculture. But what the General Assembly has challenged us to do is to think in terms of results-based accountability. So everything that we do as a Governor's Council will be with that in mind. We want to identify activities, actions that we can take that will actually turn the curve for Connecticut agriculture. And when we make those recommendations, that's how we're going to do them. I know I have like 4 minutes left, maybe 3. So our goal is to put forth to the Governor and to the General Assembly a report by the end of this year. Remember, I said we met for the first time in January of this year. We've had a very, very aggressive schedule. We've dedicated tremendous resources to what we're doing. One of the ways that we're going to make a difference is to know where we are. I talked earlier about the study that the College of Ag and Natural Resources did that measured agriculture's contribution to the state's economy. The other thing that's key to us, remember the General Assembly said increased consumer demand for locally grown from what is believed to be less than 1% to at least 5%. Well, we actually need to know where we are today. We don't. We need to create good baseline data, and we're working with UConn to do that. We have a meeting coming up in a week, bringing together experts from the college. They've identified models that they think that they can adapt to our situation here in Connecticut. We're going to create good baseline data. We're going to make recommendations as a council to get us from point A to point B, and we're going to turn the curve, and we're going to grow Connecticut farms. So, thank you very much.
Our next presenter is Dr. David Katz of the Prevention Research Center at Yale University. He's internationally known for his expertise in nutrition, weight management, and chronic disease prevention. Please welcome David Katz.
I met a traveler from an antique land who said, "Two vast and trunkless legs of stone stand in the desert. Near them on the sand half sunk, a shattered visage lies, whose frown and wrinkled lip and sneer of cold command tell that its sculptor well those passions read, which yet survive, stamped on these lifeless things, the hand that mocked them and the heart that fed. And on the pedestal these words appear, my name is Ozymandias, King of Kings. Look on my works, ye mighty, in despair. Nothing beside remains. Round the decay of that colossal wreck, boundless and bare, the lone and level sands stretch far away." Morning, folks. That's Percy Bysshe Shelley. And it is, I suppose, a somewhat bleak message. The cup of civilization is half empty. Shelley tells us that it can collapse. We've heard the same from Jared Diamond, and I commend to all of you the book, Collapse. For I fear that our relationship with food is a bad relationship. We're squandering resources, we are ravaging the planet, we are damaging our health. My particular focus is on health, our health, personal and public. That's where my efforts are directed. Those are my most acute concerns. And in many ways, I suspect they're the concerns that affect all of us and each of us most intimately every day. I've watched trends with grave concern. Worsening epidemics of obesity and diabetes, and over the span of my clinical career, the transformation of things that were bad enough when they were chronic diseases affecting middle-aged adults, converting into pediatric scourges. When I went to medical school, they taught us about two kinds of diabetes: juvenile onset and adult onset. We no longer have adult onset diabetes. We call them type 1 and type 2. Type 2 is a condition affecting adults and children alike. But make no mistake, it is adult onset diabetes. It should never occur in a child. A generation ago, it never did occur in a child. And our collective societal response to the travesty of this was to simply change the name, to drape a euphemism over it, to call it type 2 so it would feel okay that a 7-year-old gets it. We also know that diabetes is one of the most potent risk factors there is for cardiovascular disease. It simply stands to reason that when 7- and 8-year-olds are succumbing to what used to be, not all that long ago, adult onset diabetes, that by the time they turn 17 or 18, they will turn up in our emergency rooms with angina pectoris and myocardial infarction. I know the story of a 17-year-old boy who's had a triple coronary bypass. I don't want to know more. I shudder to think the day may dawn when angina is an adolescent rite of passage alongside acne. And although I have been a prophet of doom on this topic for the better part of 20 years, and I have noted the proliferation of ever more cardiac risk factors in ever younger people, our children, our grandchildren, even I did not anticipate a 35% increase in the rate of stroke among 5 to 14-year-olds in the United States. But that's exactly what we've seen. Even as the rate of stroke has declined in those aged 50 and older due to better detection and treatment of hypertension. No one knows for sure why the rate of stroke is rising in kids so young, but the only smoking gun on the scene is epidemic childhood obesity. Can you imagine anything more unconscionable than a stroke in a 10-year-old that better use of feet and forks could have prevented outright? As we look ahead at the fate of our civilization, the omens are dire. The CDC is projecting that should current trends persist, by the middle of this century, 1 in 3 of us will have diabetes. 1 in 3. There are about 27 million diagnosed diabetics in the United States right now. 1 in 3 would be well over 100 million. Well over 100 million with an often severe, always costly, potentially disabling chronic disease. Now, I don't know the politics in the room. I won't guess. I'm not young and spry enough to get out of the way when people throw things at my head anymore. But it doesn't really matter. We can all acknowledge that the big hullabaloo over healthcare reform, which, if you care to know, I do support, really had much to do with dollars. If it were all free, there would have been no fuss. Dollars didn't have to change hands, nobody would have cared. And here's the thing, as we contemplate the fate of our civilization, the whole damn thing is moot if 1 in 3 of us has diabetes. We're struggling to pay the bill now. 27 million have diabetes. How are we going to pay the bill when it's well over 100 million? I'm a physician. I'm in public health. It never dawned on me that I would find myself on the front lines of homeland security. But in fact, nothing less than that is at stake. Our land, our water, our food supply, our environment, and our health, our public health, our economic health, fate of the nation. But that's distant. There is as well an intimate connection to our relationship with food. And you can help me demonstrate that right now. Because if we were to do just 3 things right. Eat a nearly optimal diet. Real food, mostly plants. Good for the planet. Good for agriculture. Good for the economy. Good for health. If we were to use our feet well every day, daily dose of physical activity, and if we were to avoid tobacco, whether grown in Connecticut or elsewhere. Good use of feet, forks, and fingers. Were we to do that, we could eliminate 80% of all heart disease, 90% of all diabetes, and as much as 60% of all cancer. We have scientific evidence to validate these claims. Just good use of feet, forks, and fingers. But let's make it personal. How many of you love someone who's been affected by heart disease? Please raise your hand. How many of you love someone who's been affected by cancer? Please add your hand to those near. Keep your hands up. And how many of you love someone who's been affected by either stroke or diabetes? Please add your hand, and folks, look around the room. Now consider this. If knowledge were power, if what we have known for decades about the influence of just feet, forks, and fingers on medical destiny were something we put to use every day in our communities, 8 out of 10 of us in this room would not have had cause to put our hands in the air. This is the power at our disposal. And this is the cup half full. For Ozymandias reminds us that civilizations can fall. Diamond tells us they can collapse. But both tell us they are malleable. We're now more than a decade into the dawn of the genomic age and disappointed that our knowledge of the genome has not translated into our ability to fix diseases there. We cannot eliminate heart disease, cancer, stroke, and diabetes through genetic engineering. But with just the use of feet, forks, and fingers, we could eliminate 80% and cultivate the health of the planet into the bargain, create more sustainable agricultural systems, keep water drinkable, keep air breathable, and bequeath to our children and grandchildren a future in which 8 out of 10 times they don't have to raise their hand when such a question is posed. Those diseases go away. And so our economy is more vital as well. The root of all of this is culture. Culture, unlike genes, is a medium of our own devising. We can change it. We can wait for calamity. We can let it collapse. And then the choices will be imposed upon us. If the global population goes from 7 billion to 9 to 12, and we deal with global famine, we can watch it collapse. If we continue to squander resources, if we continue to squander health, we can watch it collapse. If we leave our economy in peril, we can watch it collapse, but we needn't do so. Culture is a medium of our own devising. I spoke at a Food Day event on Wednesday, which technically was Food Day, at the U.S. Capitol, presided over by Mike Jacobson, the originator of Food Day. I understand that this was the first event on the Food Day map for this year, so kudos to the local crowd. And at that event, I was part of a panel asked to contemplate the future of food, looking ahead to 2050. And although I don't have a crystal ball, the one thing I do know is this: the best way to predict the future is to create it. So let's not wonder what the future of food might be. Let's work today to create the future of food we would like to have. And I think it begins with culture. Now, collectively, we create the macro culture. But probably the basic functional unit of culture is the family. We talk about family values. Family values are culture. We have routinely raised children and grandchildren who aspire to success. And the metric of that, I suppose, has been dollars traditionally. Maybe all it would take to move toward a grand solution where health of people and health of the planet converge is to think about health a bit more like wealth. We invest in wealth. We don't spend all the money we make today. No responsible adult does. If you have a bit of money, it might be fun to spend it all today. but we put it away for the future. We think about retirement. We think about taking care of our children. It's expected of us. Our culture expects it of us. But I can tell you as a preventive medicine physician, we don't treat health that way. You know when my patients get religion? After their first heart attack, after their first stroke. It would be as if we never thought about a savings account until after bankruptcy. Why don't we treat health a bit more like wealth? Why don't we invest in it? There was a study in the Journal of the American Medical Association 2 weeks ago indicating that 20 minutes of physical activity 5 days a week in children at high risk for diabetes is the difference between them getting it and not. There are 1,440 minutes in a day. 20 minutes out of a day is 1.39% of the minutes in a day. 20 minutes 5 days a week is 0.99% of the minutes in a week. Are we not willing to find a way to invest 0.99% of the minutes in a week to immunize our children against diabetes? It's an investment. People tell me all the time they don't have time to exercise. You know what they have the time for? An ambulance ride, a stay in the CCU, taking their child to the pediatric endocrinologist. We can pay now or we can pay later. Right? It's not pleasant or convenient to put money aside. It's much more fun to spend it today. But we have a longer time horizon when we think about money. But money is not more important than food. In the beginning, money was food, and food was money. And that has woven itself into our culture and the vernacular. We talk about making dough, being the breadwinners, bringing home the bacon. That doesn't come from nowhere. It comes from the fact that back before there were dollars and coins, having enough to eat meant you were secure. It was sustenance. And then currency became a means to acquire sustenance. And then somewhere along the line, money became more important than the critical things money was used originally to buy, like food. We can fix all of this. And it's a zero-sum game. We can take better care of ourselves, better care of the planet, better care of our economy, all together. We have to care. Our culture has to say that the quality of food matters, and we need to update everything about our culture. We need to update love. Traditionally, we've shown love to one another with food. Right? You want to love a child, you give them cookies or muffins. And it's a loving thing to do up to a point. But how loving is it if the gift you give speeds a child toward adult onset diabetes in childhood? It's obsolete love, right? Encouraging one another to eat and overeat and sit around on the couch. Obsolete love. It made sense before. Throughout most of human history, calories were relatively scarce and hard to get, and physical activity was unavoidable. It did not require gym membership or specialized footwear. It was called survival, and everybody did it every day. We have devised a modern world in which physical activity is scarce and hard to get, and calories are unavoidable. Houston, we have a problem, and Trumbull too. And we can address the problem by updating our culture and updating the way we love one another. What if loving one another is helping one another be healthy? Sharing recipes that are both delicious and nutritious. Helping one another love food that loves us back. Helping our children appreciate that they should revere health. It is the greatest of all currencies, and once gone, very hard to get back. And there are simple strategies that can get us there from here. I won't belabor them today, but this is what I do. And just briefly, I view the problem that we confront, the problem that menaces our health, the health of our children, the health of our grandchildren, the health of our planet, the health of our economy, as a flood. A great big, obesogenic, morbidogenic flood. A flood of highly processed, hyper-palatable, energy-dense, nutrient-dilute, glow-in-the-dark, bet you can't eat just one kind of foods. A constant flow of marketing dollars encouraging us and our children to overeat the very foods that propel us toward obesity and chronic disease. Wave after wave of technological advance giving us gadgets and gizmos that do all the things that muscles used to do. Great big flood. And the solution is a levee. I like the levee metaphor for 3 reasons. First, it's the right solution to a flood. It's what you do when you want to contain the flood. A lot of talk of sandbags now, with Sandy headed this way, right? Second, I like the levee metaphor because it incrementalizes the solution. I'm supposedly some sort of expert in obesity and chronic disease, and what that suggests to me and to you, if you're paying attention, is that I suck. Because I've been doing this for 20 years, and the whole time I've been doing this, the problem's gotten worse, not better, right? I mean, I suck. And frankly, anybody who claims to be an expert in this space sucks too. Or we're just not there yet. Problem is bigger so far than the solution, and we need to keep stacking sandbags. And every day, every one of us can be part of the solution or part of the problem. So the levee helps me not run up the white flag and just keep at it. And the third thing I like about the levee, it's sort of a precautionary tale. We are a quick fix, silver bullet, active ingredient kind of society. But no one thing that you see on the Dr. Oz show will fix all of this. It's like putting down one sandbag and asking, are we dry yet? We have to do a lot of things right to update our culture so it reveres and cultivates health. And the sandbags in the levee are simple, practical things. And my career is devoted to producing just such sandbags, adding them to the levee, evaluating their effect, and traveling the country to disseminate them. Programs like ABC for Fitness, activity burst in the classroom, brief bursts of physical activity doled out right in the classroom when kids are unteachable because they're not paying attention. It's available for free. It's in thousands of schools. ABE for Fitness, a similar program for adults in the workplace. Nutrition Detectives, a food label literacy program available for free as a DVD in English and Spanish that teaches kids why they should care and how to identify and choose more nutritious foods. And a nutrition guidance system called NuVal, which is in Big Y supermarkets in Connecticut and Price Chopper. It's in 1,700 supermarkets in 32 states, coast to coast, reaching about 30 million people. 1 to 100, the higher the number, the more nutritious the food. And we're rolling it out in more and more schools to empower kids. We rolled it out in the Derby school system just last week. If we help people identify more nutritious food, help them realize they can love food that loves them back, help make the path to better health a path of lesser resistance, we can update our approach to all of these challenges. We can wait for all of the perils that surround us now to grow larger. Wait and see if our civilization can withstand it. Wait and see if we wind up a shattered statue in the sands of some desert. Or we can make better use of our feet, forks, and fingers. Fix it right now. Thank you all very much.
And I'm just noticing that our index cards apparently have arrived, so they're being passed out. If you have a question, please write it as clearly as possible on the index card, and you can pass them to the sides during the remainder of the presentations. It's now my pleasure to introduce John Tureen. He is the president of Sustainable Food Systems, and he designed, developed, and implemented the internationally recognized Yale Sustainable Food Project. Please welcome John Tureen.
Be good to the land, and the land will be good to you. Farmer Jones. It's not quite as deep and profound, but as Dr. Katz was sharing that, I was thinking, I need to share something. That actually is engraved on a large stone monument within a few miles from here. Has anybody read that or know where that is? Jones Family Farm in Shelton? That's the Farmer Jones that carved that. It is. It's up on there. But, I mean, does that start to touch what we're here about today? Be good to the land, and the land will be good to you. So I want to share with you, it is a story, and it's a story of change. I want everybody to understand a little bit about my background, my professional background. For a long, long time, I was responsible for providing food service to large institutions. institutional food service. And the way I define institutional food service is having to serve a lot of food to a lot of people for very little money. Public school systems, private schools, colleges, hospitals, these are the type of places that I was responsible for serving food at. And I worked for a large corporation. I worked for the man, and had to, every Friday afternoon, report my financial performance. So I can tell you my weekends were based on how much money and profit I made for corporate food, America, the companies I worked for. So you can understand, and my performance was based, and appraisal was based on how well I did financially. It was about bottom line profits, top line sales, and maybe a little bit about customer service. But that was really it. I never really stopped and thought about the impact and the stories behind the food that I was serving. But all that changed one day. I can literally tell you one day when this woman walked into my life. And the woman, we're not talking about my wife, she did change my life drastically, but this is another story. I was the executive chef at Yale University, and I was very busy one day setting up for the Yale-Harvard football game. And my cell phone rang, and it was my boss. He said, "Stop what you're doing, come on over to the president's office, we need to meet with a parent." The parent, well, first of all, I said, "You've got to be kidding me, I'm a little bit busy here. I'm getting ready to serve 5,000 rather inebriated college students a picnic tomorrow. You're the one who meets with the parents, and I've never been called to the president's office. Who is this? Why is this parent so important?" He said, "This parent is Alice Waters." Now, as a food service professional, it sounds like a lot of people know who she is. The first thing I had to do was pick up my cell phone off the ground. The second thing was to stop stuttering. What does she want? But bottom line was Alice convinced Rick Levin, the president of Yale, to start thinking differently about the food that we were providing 6,000 undergraduate students on a daily basis. She wanted him to start serving sustainable food. And as the proverbial stuff, rolls downhill when it comes to delegation of new projects, and eventually, the administration came to the executive chef and said, "We're really intrigued by what this passionate, wild, crazy woman from California is talking about. Seasonality, organic foods, locally sourced, healthy, raw, real, cooked from scratch foods, really the right thing. How do we make that happen here in New Haven?" And it's your job to figure it out, John. And this was 2001. The question was what year? It's 2001. So fast forward here, because I also want to share with you some of the stories of success and how we can go forward. The bottom line was, I said, I love challenges. I have one first question: what the heck is sustainable food? What is this about? What is this all about? I literally and figuratively had to go to school and understand the impact and the stories behind the food that we serve, that we were serving to a large number of students here, but that we served globally, nationally, locally, in our homes, the stories behind the food. I came to learn that there were in my mind, there are 4 pillars that define what the heck sustainable food was. And once I understood this is where things in my mind and in my heart and eventually in my hands started to change. I understood that sustainable food is defined as the environmental impact that food production has on our planet. How is it produced? What impact, how much water was it consumed? What inputs went into the ground, the earth? What kind of impact on our soil, on our ecosystems does food production have, or livestock waste, or livestock, methane gases, all these things. You get the picture. Environmental impact was one of the pillars. So, okay, I'm beginning to understand that. Second impact was the impact of our local economies. Who do we buy our food from? And for me, we're talking global, large, massive companies coming from all over the planet or the country, not stopping and thinking about the farms and the food producers or the artisans in our neighborhoods, in our communities. So the sustainability of our local economy, who we buy our food from, was the second pillar. The third pillar of sustainability was the social issues around food production, animal welfare, farm worker rights, and believe me, working on a college campus, students can be pretty active about the social issues surrounding food when it comes to that. The fourth pillar of sustainability, I could barely hold a candle to Dr. Katz, but it's the sustainability of our own health and well-being. I mean, I had a responsibility as a chef for my customers' health and well-being and the quality of the food that I was serving. Did I ever give that much of a thought? Not on Friday afternoons when I was crunching numbers, and had to get those numbers in. So environmental impact, the impact on our local economies, social rights, and health and well-being, the sustainability of all those. Once I started getting that here, things started changing here. And I said to myself and my colleagues, we need to do something about this. So we had to then figure out, so we understood why, now we had to figure out how and how to go about doing that. So that we started considering issues about seasonality. Food has a season. What are the makeups? Whether it's highly processed frozen food coming in off of a truck that we put an order in from a computer 3 weeks ago that goes into a freezer, onto a sheet pan, and into an oven. We need to start thinking about simplifying, toning down, and simplifying food. Quick story. I had the opportunity last night, or the last 2 days, it took us a couple days to get this ready, to be on a school campus in Massachusetts, hosting a dinner for Frances Moore LePay, the woman who wrote Diet for a Small Planet. And this is a school that wants to start to get it, wants to be like we started to do at Yale. So we had to start thinking about the food service people were all about, okay, well, we've got to have a menu, and it's going to be 25 items long, and we've got to have all kinds of sauces and garnishes and complications and going on and on and on. I said, stop right there. What kind of farms do we have in the area? Let's not even write a menu until we find out what can we get for ingredients. So these are kind of the passion, as a chef, was to start thinking about what do we got and what can I do with it. So we ended up providing a dinner that had pickled carrots from the school garden that the kids grew, that the kids brought in these piles of dirty carrots. And again, the food service workers were, I'm used to getting, in these carrots that are already peeled and cut into sticks, and they'll last us 3 weeks in this bag and brine that they're in. And there's this box of mud, and we're pulling these carrots out. And I said, this is beautiful. This is organic. They've got an organic garden. This dirt, okay, we don't want to eat the dirt. But what this signifies, the story behind these carrots. So we had pickled carrots. We got some butternut squash and local Matsu apples and made a butternut squash and apple bisque. And then we got some chicken, some kale, and some potatoes, and served the family-style dinner of roast chicken, roasted potatoes, and braised kale with an apple cider. And then we made a little bread pudding with apples sweetened with maple syrup and a local ice cream for dessert. That was it. And the results were, oh my God, this dinner is delicious. But it wasn't as easy as what I just described. This is some of the challenges that we're working with when we're talking institutional change, institutional food service change. A story about the potatoes on that meal that I just described. I had to stop at one of the distribution centers on the way up on early Thursday morning to pick up some of the ingredients, that they had kind of used as a hub. The farmers come into this distribution center. But this distribution center also deals with global food. So it's dark out, it's 6 o'clock in the morning, and I'm schlepping some of this food to my car. So, and they'd gotten it from the farms in that area. And as I go under the light out to my car, I'm carrying a 50-pound bag of the red bee potatoes. And I'm looking under the light, and I can't even read a word. It's all in French on the bag. And I looked farther down, it says produce of Quebec. Turned around and went back in, and I said, time out a second here. This was supposed to be from Slemensky Farms in Hatfield, Massachusetts. I don't think that's in Quebec. Where are the potatoes? So, again, we ended up, I had to spend an extra 45 minutes demanding that they go back into trucks and go back into finding this. And then when they come back, they still said, well, we have potatoes from Slemensky Farms in Hatfield, but they're not the red Bs. We only have red A potatoes, so I guess you'll take the red Bs from Quebec. I said, no! No. We want to support the local farms, that local aspect of the sustainable pillar. I'll take the red A's. We'll change the menu a little bit, But that's the kind of mentality and kind of passion and persistence as a food service operator that has to happen out there. The customer demand for this kind of stuff. It isn't going to be where you walk into and pull something off a shelf. It's not easy. It takes effort. It takes work. You need to understand. You need and believe in your commitment and stick to it. That's not easy when you're a manager in a public school system trying to serve 10,000 students, let's say, and you've got to meet the nutritious guidelines, dietary guidelines, and meet bottom line, dollars and cents. I like to say as well that one of the aspects about my past life, professional life, was about dollars and cents. Now I like to think it's about common sense. It's evolved into that. So I started touching on what some of the challenges are. Some of the questions that I received that you all were interested in is trying to understand what is it price? What stops institutional food service from buying more? What is local foods or sustainable foods? Some of the challenges, as I just started to articulate, just distribution. How do we get the product from the farm, the local farm that we need to into these institutions? We've got there are so many roadblocks to get over. There's so many challenges. When an institution orders off of a keyboard 2 and 3 weeks ahead of time, it's a little difficult to be calling and trying to work with, Jones Farm for kale, or something to that effect. They're not going to be taking an order electronically over a keyboard. So we've got to start small. We've got to start working on developing a face-to-face relationship, but also experience has shown me that those hubs or aggregators or distributors are some of the answers to try to move multiple local products through. So when you hear that term food hub or distributor or local distributor, that's an opportunity to overcome that challenge. I've mentioned consumer demand. It's pretty easy to say yes, local or sustainable food is in demand. But when it becomes awfully difficult, we're a multitasking society these days, and as Dr. Katz articulated, our own health sometimes takes a back seat to other issues, whether it's the internet or television or sports events or anything kind of things takes a back seat. We've got to start convincing people about the stories behind food. That's what got me changed. What impact? Why does this happen when I make a decision about food or purchasing food? Here's another challenge facing our public schools right now. You may have read it was a cover story in the New York Times a couple of weeks ago. The USDA, in a good sense, just changed this year the regulations for the first time in quite a few years, the nutritional guidelines for what school meals have to entail. They have to there's actually a cap on the number of calories that need to be served. We're starting to talk about grains, the number of whole grains served, the number of not just green vegetables but orange vegetables. It's wonderful. It's great. So the food service personnel, the professionals, the people that that do what I used to do are working extremely hard to try to understand that and make sure they adhere to them, because guess what? If they don't adhere to that, it's going to impact them. They don't receive funding, financial funding for this, so they have to adhere. They can't go anywhere else. They have to stay within that box. But you know what? And this is where that article on the front page of the New York Times, Lucy's nodding her head. The kids are revolting, are rebelling, saying, I don't want to eat this stuff. And they're throwing it away because we have to adhere to these guidelines. They're throwing it away. And then they're turning around and have the audacity to say, we're hungry. I don't have enough to eat. You're limiting the number of calories I get to have. Well, there's enough calories, but what it is, you don't want, you're throwing it away. So what has to happen, and what we're starting to work on now, or in districts that I'm working in, is we have to educate our kids, explain the stories behind the food, that the impact that the food has, and make food and good food cool again. You know, chefs are cool, though good food is cool. We've got to educate them. And when you're sitting there talking about, when these kids are talking about being hungry, they need to understand what real hunger is. You know, it's not throwing your fruits and vegetables away and complaining. There's some serious impact on and understanding that can happen, that they need to know. So there's a lot when it comes to defining what a sustainable food, or what a sustainable food system is. When we work, and I get the opportunity to work with institutions or schools, there's a process that we have to go through. It's 5 spokes long. It involves only one of the spokes is food, folks. We have to also understand and get the community involved. We have to understand what the infrastructure, what are we cooking with? What are we working with? The physical facility. We have to understand how are we educating and communicating, and we have to be sure that we're nutritionally and financially stable. We can't ignore that part of it too. But if we address all 5 and we do it in incremental steps, I've never seen an institution or even a home for that matter fail. It's not about forcing. It's about nurturing and collectively educating and getting people to understand what those stories are behind the food. So what I usually tell people, whether I'm working in Fairfield Schools or at Yale University or at this Brooks School up in North Andover, Massachusetts yesterday, is understand what the options are. Don't try to do too much, but just try to do one thing more. And when you do that one thing, then just do one thing more. And when you do that, do one thing more. It's about progressively. You can't not succeed. It'll work every time. So I commend you for what you're doing here as you go out and try to impact changes in your world. Or think about it when it comes to food. Understand the stories. Make a commitment to do one thing more. Thank you.
And last but certainly not least, please welcome Lucy Nolan, who is the Executive Director at End Hunger Connecticut. Lucy?
Good morning, everyone. I really am lucky in the enviable position of being really following these guys, because they really have imparted so much great information. I was furiously taking notes, and I just wanted to point out quickly, because somebody said they didn't know who we were, and outside there are some of these brochures, and inside is a little fact sheet about End Hunger Connecticut, so you can get an idea of the kind of work we do. But we do a lot of advocacy work and work outreach on the federal food programs, so SNAP and the child nutrition programs like school meals, school breakfast, summer feeding programs, and after-school suppers, really trying to get low-income children and families the food that they need to live a successful life. So that's a little bit about what I'm going to be talking about, which is a little bit different, but really does work into everything we've heard today. In Connecticut, there's a question, there's a Gallup poll that comes out. They question 1,000 people a day. And one of the questions is, have you had trouble buying food sometime for you or your family sometime during the last year? Inability to buy food. And in Connecticut, it says, have there been times in the past 12 months that you have not had money to buy food that you and your family needed? Last year, 12.6% of families without children said yes. 18.8% of families with children said yes. In Connecticut. I mean, we're not talking about Mississippi. We're talking about Connecticut. And in the first 6 months of this year, the 12.6% went up to 15%. So I think that's a very significant number, and I think it's something that we really have to pay attention to when we think about food and people's ability to access fresh fruits and vegetables. Because one of the things we're hearing today is some of that there might be a lack of ability to get it or the cost of it. There's a lot of things going on when we talk about food. So one of the things, Connecticut also had last year the 5th highest rate in child poverty in the country. I mean, it just blows my mind because this is Connecticut that we're talking about. Bridgeport has 39.9% children poverty. So, and that's the highest. It goes down to Waterbury, 30.4% of the 5 cities in the state of Connecticut. So there are a lot of people that are using federal food programs. About 1 in 4 Americans have used the federal food programs at some point in their life, and that may include school lunch, which most children do take advantage of. And, John is absolutely right. The complaints about not having enough to eat, that we're hungry and then throwing away so much food, really is a bit about kids and families having to relearn what we need to eat. And several years ago, we worked with Dr. Katz and John on changing Connecticut school meals, and actually the federal new program was taken a little bit after the Connecticut program. So we're ahead of the curve on that. But kids need to relearn how to eat, and school is one places that we can really do it. So I just wanted to give you, people talk about private food and charitable food, and I think it's important for all of us to know that 1/8 of low-income people rely on private food charities. And they only provide 7% of the food. The federal government or government programs provide 90% of the food that low-income people can have. So when there is talking of giving back, taking away food stamps or SNAP from the federal government's purview and giving it back to private charities, the Bread for the World has estimated that it would cost every single church in the country $50,000 a year to take on what the federal government does. So there's a lot of money that goes into these programs, but private charity can't do it themselves. We really need to rely on the government for these programs. So that brings us to SNAP, or what used to be called food stamps. It's a Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, which is really, the name was changed was to say, look, this is a nutrition program. This isn't a welfare program, it's a nutrition program. It's the largest program administered by the USDA, and it was started during that's not right. But so it started early in the Depression, went away, then came back in the 70s because families were really needed that extra help. It's really supposed to be a program that helps families get, if they're having tough times, to be able to get some food. And we have seen that in Connecticut. We have now 398 thousand people using the program. That's 72% of the participants that we're reaching 72% of the those who need it. There's 216,000 households, and the average benefit per participant is $136 a month, and for family it's $251 a month. So it's great because that's something, but it's not a lot. For those of us who buy food and try to buy locally, it doesn't take families very far, and in fact it may take them halfway through the month or 3/4 of the way through the month, and then they go and they'll rely on the private charities and food banks, or they won't eat. And the program, it's because it's based on the cost of the Thrifty Food Program, which is below even the low cost program, which is the federal government's lowest food program that they have. And last year they increased $13 to increase the amount of money that families would get, and as any of us know, the price of food has increased significantly than $13. So an average of $13. But it's based on a minimum wage of $8 an hour. It takes $78 for a family to cover the current cost of the Thrifty Food Plan, which would be $625 a month for a family, and they're getting $216. So it's a third of what they need for that program. But so the SNAP program, we hear a lot of people people talk about the program, and I just wanted to give that a little bit so you could see that the cost isn't there. So when people say, why aren't low-income people buying more fruits and vegetables? They shouldn't be buying soda. They shouldn't be buying junk food. Well, what costs the least amount of money? It's those things. And to say, people can't buy certain foods with that money, it makes perfect health sense, and I agree with that. But until we can give people more money and make that food more accessible, it's really detrimental to people to be able to not buy some of those low-cost foods. Also, when we're talking about low-income people, we're also talking about families who don't know how to cook. It may not have been passed down from generation to generation. They may not have the ability to cook. There might not be stoves or, working stoves or whatever. So those are things in the back of our mind we have to think about all the time. And, why isn't a family eating these things? It may be because they're incapable of doing so. And it's our responsibility to help move those people along. And I think that's a lot of what the school nutrition legislation is about that happened. So I don't want to say, it's not us about food too, because one of the things the commissioner talked about was how much money we bring into the state of Connecticut with locally grown. Well, for every $5 that comes in with SNAP money into the state of Connecticut results in $9.20 in local economic stimulus. People have to get, grocery stores hire more people, things like that. And it also brings into Connecticut over $575 million in federal funds. So think about doubling that in economic stimulus. And 97% of all SNAP dollars are spent within the month that they get them. So it's turned around. So that's one of the reasons why with the first ARRA money, stimulus money, was put into increasing SNAP dollars. And what happened was that for the first time, hunger went down. And then it went back up again once those ARRA dollars went away. So it does have an immediate impact on families' ability to buy food. So one of the things that I was asked to talk about too was about food deserts, and I think a lot of people are interested in that. It's a geographic area with limited access to healthy and affordable foods. We see that in a lot of rural areas, but we also see it in a lot of urban areas. So Hartford, Bridgeport, New Haven. New Haven is the fifth has the, I don't know if it's how to say it exactly, but has is the 5th worst food desert in the country. I think isn't that amazing? I mean, here we are. This is Connecticut. This is what always just blows me away, because we shouldn't be having these problems in this state. We really shouldn't. So part of it is because there's lack of supermarkets, there's lack of transportation, and that you have a lot of small stores that don't carry produce, they don't carry fruits and vegetables. And so on average, some of those in Hartford, there was a study done by UConn, by the School of Health, and 3.5 types of fruit and 4.7 types of fresh vegetables are sold in bodegas in the grocery stores. And that includes grocery stores and bodegas together as an average. Hartford, there's one grocery store. It's sort of out in the edge of town. So, but what has happened is that the WIC program, which is Women, Infants, and Children program, and that's a program for mothers that are pregnant or have had children and their children up to age 5. And it's clearly a nutrition program. You have to go see a doctor, you see a nutritionist, and that program, they have what's called stores that people are able to buy WIC food at, because they give you, unlike the SNAP program, they give actual coupons for specific foods. And so to be a WIC store, you have to have certain milk, you have to have low-fat milk, you have to have certain low-sugar cereals, fresh fruits and vegetables, all sorts of those things. And one of the things that happened because of these WIC stores and the change in last 2 years ago, they changed the WIC, what foods people could buy with the WIC, and to make them more fresh, less canned and frozen, is that the selection in bodegas and in corner stores really increased significantly people's access to fresh fruits and vegetables in the cities, in the food deserts. So we are seeing that there is a way to change these programs. And so, one of the things that we need to do, though, is to target some of those snacks that kids, you can spend $1 and for $1 get 1,200 calories. I mean, so we really need to think about, again, it's about teaching kids what to eat and how to eat, and what it tastes good, what not to throw away. Also, I wanted to talk a little bit about the federal poverty level, just because that's important, I think, to put a lot of this into perspective. A family of 4 at 185% of the federal poverty level, which is what makes somebody eligible for the SNAP program, is at about $40,000 a year gross income. So everything's done on gross income. So also there's a school breakfast program, which is End Hunger Connecticut has been working significantly on trying to get more schools to increase the participation in that program. Connecticut is last in the nation for the number of schools that participate in that program. We were, a couple years ago, 42nd in the nation for the number of schools that participate in the program. Working with the State Department of Ed and working with the legislature, we've been able to move up to 29th in the nation by really working together, doing some collaboration and doing some significant outreach through our Connecticut No Kid Hungry campaign, but also working with the school food service directors. And just this year alone, we've had 39 new schools come in on the program. And this is significant because Connecticut, I just feel like the doom and gloom here today, but Connecticut has the largest achievement gap in the nation as well. And one way that we think we can help move kids and help them learn better is by eating breakfast, right? We've all been told our whole life, we've probably told our own children, I know I have. I've thrown breakfast bars at my high schooler as he's leaving 5 minutes before the first bell. Eat your breakfast, because that, helps you get plenty of sleep and eat your breakfast. And so we now trying to move kids into eating breakfast in the classroom to have that, because then we know everyone will eat. It gets rid of the stigma, and it really has decreased kids' problems with having stomach aches or even behavior issues. I mean, eating breakfast is significant. Plus, it helps with weight issues, and so that's one of the very important things. We also work on summer feeding programs. I don't know if you know, kids who eat free and reduced price meals during the school year, during the summer, they don't have any place to get meals. So the private food charities, we always think now's the time when they get hit the hardest, but it's actually the summertime is when their shelves are empty, because so many families are trying to make up for this lost food. And so there are summer feeding programs where they can go to open sites, and anyone under age 18 and under can get a meal. Connecticut, we do very well in that. We're like number 4 in the nation for participation, yet only 25% of those eligible are receiving meals in the summertime. So there's a lot of work that still needs to be done on that. So one of the things I did want to talk too about was about, when we talk about the paradox, they call it the paradox between hunger and obesity, because you do see a lot of low-income people who may be heavier, right? And I think part of that is talking about the accessibility and the cost of foods and things like that. But we also have to think about lack of physical activity. One of the things Dr. Katz was talking about, unsafe streets, and a lot of schools are getting rid of gyms and recess. And so that's something, that we could all work on, making sure that doesn't happen. And skipping meals when food is scarce, particularly moms. A lot of moms, low-income moms, don't eat because they want their kids to eat. And that creates this whole metabolic syndrome, which I'm sure Dr. Katz could explain better than I can. But what we do see. So I just, all right, very quickly, because I got in my 5 minutes, is that one of the things about access for fresh fruits and vegetables, there's a study by the Food Resource and Action Center, FRAC, which is a great organization for a lot of food policy. And in Connecticut, 9.5% of households with children have stated this through this Gallup poll again, the inability to get fresh fruits and vegetables, and 7.6 households without children have had difficulty. So 10% of households with children have had difficulty getting fresh fruits and vegetables. And partly that's funds, lack of transportation, and lack of larger grocery stores. And I think some of the important programs we've heard about today to help that would be Farm to School, farmers markets. There's some great farmer market programs. We have Wholesome Wave here in Bridgeport that has funded a lot of programs to do double coupons for people with EBT or with SNAP benefits, New Haven and Hartford, so that if somebody buys $5 worth of something at a farmer's market, they can get $10 worth of produce, which is a really great way to help people learn about farmers markets and get out there. And the school meals we heard about as a great way, and the WIC changes in the stores. And so we're seeing things happen, but we still see a lot of hunger. So we have to figure out what it is that's creating this hunger, even though we're seeing that better foods are getting out there. So what are some of the things you can do? We can help families buy better foods. We move and work in our communities to build grocery stores, to make sure that smaller stores are serving the foods. We can buy our foods at those places so that they know that people are interested. We can buy more locally grown food. I use something called Connecticut Farm Express. I don't know if any of you heard about it, but you can go and they'll pick up food for you all over the state of Connecticut and bring it to your house. It's a little expensive, but oh my God, it's unbelievably good. Pork chops, out of this world, I'm telling you. I'm like going crazy for pig these days. But that is something that we can do to support our farmers. But also, we need to really increase families' economic security. That is one of the things that we can do here in Connecticut, in the richest state in the country that also has some of the biggest, highest poverty rates in the country, is for people to be able to buy food. They have to have good jobs and they have to have health care. There's so many pieces that go into what people eat and how they eat, and it is a circle. It all works in together. So that is something to work with local and state legislators. And one of the questions I was asked was, is this a local or statewide or a national how can we deal with it? And we can deal with it in all ways. And that is, we really need to look at, around the state, there's food policy councils. So this is one from New Haven that they came out with a plan that's great. There's a state food policy council, and we can work with your community to be able to build a food policy council, and we can help you. The State Department of Ag can help. Anybody, we'd be happy to work with communities and make sure that we adequately fund programs and work with other pro-community groups like Food Corps that works to help schools. So then the last thing I just want to say is Congressman McGovern from Massachusetts, I was watching a movie called Food Stamped on my food. I was speaking on Food Day at an event. And one of the things he said was, and I think is key, is that hunger is a political condition. And everything we're talking about today is a political condition, and we can all, by raising our voices and doing some work, can make a change in that. So thank you very much.
So I hope you agree that I did not mislead when I said there would be a lot of food for thought at today's conference. There's so many thanks that we have to give to the conference, that we have to thank our panelists, our moderator, our sponsor Cigna. I would also like to please ask the committee that helped pull together all the various elements of this program to please stand. We have Alona Vosnes, Judy Dolphin in the back, Christine Lodewijk, Asha Shipman, Rick Schultz, and Carol Marie and Jean Wagner. I'm also really thrilled to welcome those of you who are not league members to today's event. There are quite a few of you, and the League of Women Voters is really, we consider ourselves a safe haven for political discourse, and there aren't that many in this day and age. And we also try to make complicated issues clearer by presenting programs like this, where you have this variety of perspectives. So if this is the kind of work that you think is valuable, I hope you will learn more about us. You can take a look at our website. We're always looking for people to help us in our mission to inform and engage the public about the decisions that government is making that affect their lives. Finally, we have a very sweet ending, courtesy of Farmer's Cow. So we have ice cream available to all of you as a result. Is Catherine here? Thank you, Catherine, so much. Catherine Smith from Farmer's Cow is here. One final thing, for those of you who are league members, we are taking some group shots by your community. So if you have not yet had a photograph taken with your colleagues from your towns, please see Alona. Thank you all. Safe travels and safe next week.